The absolute highest standard for fine dining possible. What is it? It's Michelin Star dining. And as you may be aware, the Michelin Star has been in Canada for a few short years now, with already quite a presence in Toronto. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the epic Michelin Star standard and if the Toronto Michelin Star restaurants live up to that standard. Why are we talking about this? Why is this video worth putting online? Because I am sick and tired of people, working hard for a living, trying to save up and splurge on these expenses, only to find out a lot of times that these experiences suck. Watch it. I'm not saying the Michelin Star restaurants in Toronto suck. Don't come at me for that. I just mean in general, the saying, all utopias are created by those that are not there. So we huff and puff around a certain high class or fancy schmancy level of establishment, and then when a lot of people get there, they are disappointed by the experience. So let's save you the disappointment. Watch this freaking video and let's talk about everything wrong with the Michelin Star in Toronto. If you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Pamela. I am a business lawyer with my own law firm that operates anywhere in the province of Ontario, Canada, but of course headquartered in Toronto. And while I have a law firm channel where we give free educational information to business owners and entrepreneurs, this is the lifestyle, a little bit spicier channel that I can't put on my law firm profile, and so I don't. So let's talk about it. And for those of you that are returning viewers, I love you. Let's keep this channel growing the way you have. Thank you. And, honestly, spread the truth out there to more people. So let's get to it. Michelin Star. First of all, what is it? If you may not have heard, that's okay. The Michelin Star was a guide that was created a long time ago that had nothing to do, Michelin Star is not a famous restaurant somewhere in the world. Michelin is named after the Michelin tire company that was trying to sell more tires, so they pinpointed all of these locations that were really far from each other as locations worth driving to, so you could wear out the tires, driving to and eating there. And that's how we got the Michelin Star guide launched, decades ago. And now, of course, it is throughout the world. I mean, not everywhere. Canada didn't have it literally up to a few years ago. A country that I recently visited that I know doesn't have it is Australia, and so on and so forth. But anyways, as time grew, the reputation grew, the opulence grew, then the Michelin Star restaurants became not necessarily known as the most expensive restaurants in the world, but became, the threshold fancier and fancier and fancier. Steak and fries doesn't cut it at a Michelin Star restaurant. We're not talking about the conventional steakhouse vibes that some people might associate with luxury. Michelin Star requires a little bit of zing to it, creativity, art, extra labor and effort. So let's talk about it. Disclaimer, I'm not going to talk about everything wrong with a Michelin Star guide in Toronto because that's a really long list. Some of you might even find it, dare I say, the truth in that list might be annoying from a viewership perspective, digestibility perspective. So let's digest. First of all, I find that the guide to Michelin Star, not nominated, awarded restaurants in Toronto is extremely lacking in diversity. There's about, I want to say 10, there might be 12, but when I say 10, the point is there aren't 50. There's about 10 Michelin Star restaurants in Toronto. Many of them are Italian, okay? And many of them are Japanese. I'm not even going to go into the detail of the fact that 4 out of the 10 are Japanese and the Toronto population is not 40% Japanese. I'm not going down that road, and same with the Italian, by the way, because that might be, too hard to follow. I'm going to go down the other road of what's missing. When you look at some of the most popular cuisines, and you can Google this, that are on takeout order in Toronto, it is really shocking to me that we don't have something like Indian cuisine on the list when Indian is contributing so highly to the Toronto dining scene. I mean, Indian takeout in some countries, like in the UK, it's the number one go-to takeout. But even in Toronto, even in Canada, it is top 5 on the list for sure. And to not see an Indian restaurant on the Michelin list, it kind of listen, as a lawyer, it kind of highlights that there's some squeaking going on behind the scene that is not necessarily fully merit-based. Because how could it be that in this extremely diverse and multicultural city, we don't have, for example, an Indian restaurant? There are some cuisines that are always jibbed, like the Caribbean or a lot of the African-inspired cuisines, whether relating to the Caribbean or not. Those can be different cuisine groups, those two. That's nowhere on the list. Although again, you know, jerk chicken, shops like that, like they are all throughout Toronto. And there's even, you know, there's no Thai food on the list. Thai food statistically is top 5 on takeout around the world. There are some very good places like that. And I know that the, you know, discriminatory undertones we've been fed is that, well, those cuisines aren't fancy or stuff like that, you know? And believe me, I come from a place myself where the cuisine of my home country is not that fancy. But we got taco stands listed on the Michelin Star for the first time now around the world. We have, out of Mexico, we have barbecue places like picnic table eating in the US put on the Michelin Star list. So don't talk to me about fancy. That's not what it's about. It is just a lack of representation. It is a lack of authenticity in the fabric, in the tapestry of what actually comprises the Toronto dining scene. I don't want to go into any more detail, like I said, and I'm reluctant to go into more detail because I don't know if the value of the detail I'd like to go into will translate. But, you know, on the Italian front, for example, 2 restaurants on the list are owned by the same family. Not owned, but, you know, operated. Is that okay? Well, sure, it's okay hypothetically. I mean, Gordon Ramsay has multiple institutions on the list, so why not? But they're spread out, and they're not like 2 out of 10, like 20% of the list. Again, 10 I use as a general number, but could be 11, could be 12. It's not 50. So the lack of diversity on the list is really disappointing. And the second one might be tied to the first one if you think about the background, that if we have less diversity in voices, you know, it's the result we're putting out might be different than if we had more diversity in voices represented. And to be very clear, I'm not saying we should slap an Indian restaurant on there just for the sake of slapping one on there. No, I'm saying that there are good Indian restaurants in Toronto that have been missed on the list. Or if the guide wanted to, if diversity really mattered to the guide, they could go to the restaurants that are, I'm sticking to Indian just for the sake of keeping it linear. They could go to those restaurants and say, hey, you would have almost made it if it weren't for this fine touch, and actually elevate and bring up different groups, okay? Back to the second issue. The second issue, even if all these restaurants were owned by the exact same individual who would have the same exact, you know, DNA when it comes to diversity and life experiences and all that, there genuinely is not, the Michelin Star restaurants in Toronto are genuinely not the best of what the Michelin Star restaurants worldwide have to offer when it comes to creativity. You think about a creative Michelin Star dining experience, think about Grant Achatz and his restaurant in Chicago, okay? Might I add, somebody that lost like most of his taste buds owing to tongue and throat cancer, I believe. So then to still have 3 Michelin stars in Canada, the most we have is 2 at a restaurant. To have 3 Michelin stars despite all of that, I mean, we're just talking next level culinary genius. But I digress. So in Toronto, you know, having been to a few of the establishments, it's very like, here's food, you know. One place I went to, the latest Michelin Star restaurant I went to in Toronto is called Osteria Julia. And I'll show some photos here of the food we have, and I'll comment on it as we see it.
Bread that has grill marks yet is cold. Explain that one to me. Also explain how this piece of bread is sliced in 4, but you'll see the two corner pieces are twice as big as the middle pieces and yet receive the same exact amount of condiments. I don't like that. Pay attention to the details. The world's thinnest focaccia that you can see me ripping up into literally a nothing. This beet fig salad at least had effort that had gone into cutting things up small. This, you know, creamy pasta situation, the tomato acid at the bottom, not great. This pasta, I mean, again, like we've seen a plate of pasta. The pasta, I'll say, was very generous in the amount of crab it had in it, yes. But come on, it's pasta. And this millefeuille, I don't know if it was a freshness matter or a formula, a recipe matter, but a millefeuille should like crack apart. This one, because it didn't, as you would try to break it in the middle, you would just get the mousse out instead. So at the end, look what we're left with, just dry dough on my fork, because it wasn't a great eating experience.
But as you've just seen from all those photos, there's nothing there that looks like unrecognizable. The pasta looks like pasta, the millefeuille looks like millefeuille, the grilled bread, that was surprising in the negative sense, and so on and so forth. It's not, where's the, if you go to Grand Acad's place, you're eating balloons, you're tasting air. There are pillows made of scents. It's just, it's creative. This food, I could get the Osteria Giulia example, very similar food for a fraction of the price from my local, thin crust, slightly elevated Italian shop in the neighborhood. It's not very clear that this is a Michelin star experience. So that's the second point. And the third point I'm going to make is not even pertaining, the experience at a restaurant is what? Front of the house, back of the house, right? If you've ever spent any time, those of us that started with nothing, one of my 30 jobs before I turned 18 was working at a restaurant. So back of the house could cook up the best food, but in front of the house is delivering it it will obviously impact your experience. And I'll stick to the I won't single out Osteria Giulia for this. It is commentary throughout the Michelin star experiences I've had in Toronto. I find that the service does not do right by the level of play we're supposed to be at. What do I mean? I feel that if you go to a Michelin star restaurant in France, for example, it is almost, and not to sound, fluffy, but it's an honor. It is a personal honor. Or Japan, oh my God. It is a personal honor for the staff to be serving you this, holy food. I don't mean holy necessarily in the religious sense. I mean holy in terms of the accomplishment, the level we're at. It is personal for them to bring that to your table. In Toronto, when I go to the Michelin star restaurants, I'm like, this person could have worked at Tim Hortons. I don't see a difference in attitude. And again, I anticipate, as I speak out loud, I try to anticipate, how is it coming across? I don't want you to think, so you want to be fluffed up just because you went to a Michelin star restaurant. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about respect for them to pay to their own even institution that they work at. Respect for them to pay to the labor that, their colleagues, the chefs in the back put into the food they're presenting me with. The attitude, and it's one of those if you know, but if you don't know, let me tell you so you avoid the disappointment. The attitude is very, I don't know if lackadaisical is the right word. Nonchalant. That's a easier, nonchalant. I think that's the attitude is very. Thanks for coming. Here's the bill. And I feel that is not necessarily the most appropriate tone when we're talking about Michelin star dining. So there you have it. My humble and what's another H word? Honest opinions when it comes to the Michelin star situation in Toronto. I hope this video comes in good timing because a lot of us would conventionally be splurging on these experiences around the holidays. Holidays are coming up. I guess we're in the midst of some holidays. And I just want you to be careful with that money you work so hard for. Not all that shines is gold. Not all that glitters, perhaps the expression is. English is my third language. Not all that glitters, I think is the expression, but English is my third language I learned of the many languages I speak. Not all that glitters is gold, okay? So do your research, do right by the time that you spend translating into money to then translate into handing it over to somebody else, cooking you a meal for the night. If you have the discretionary income where spending it on these establishments is not a make or break, Are they worth visiting? Of course, even if from the historic angle, you know, one of the first, Osteria Julia, for example, and again, just like with the Indian food, I'm just sticking to one example to make it linear. Osteria Julia was one of the first restaurants in Toronto to have a Michelin star. You know, is it worth seeing that situation? Yeah, I don't regret going, but would I go again? I don't think so. Thank you for watching. Give this video a big like, thumbs up, and click subscribe, and share your comments down below. I know some of you must have tried these restaurants, and I know for others of you, these restaurants must be on your list. So what did you think? And I also know you guys are foodies, because when I posted the crumble cookies video review on this channel, you guys went nuts agreeing and being like, yeah, they're not it. So talk to me.